Catherine came to Atlanta out of Memphis, Tennessee. Actually, she had heard a lecture way back by Lamar Dodd, and went to the University of Georgia to pursue study of art, but got a Ford Foundation grant to come work, as she did, to study at Atlanta College of Art. That's where she got her BFA, MFA at Georgia State. She's retired from Emory in 2009 after many, many years teaching here as senior lecturer in drawing and painting. But I wanted to mention in particular, of course, her own artwork. And even before you had completed your degrees, Katherine had solo exhibitions here and there, and it's just been a remarkable career. Certainly numerous solo exhibitions here in Georgia, but throughout the country and Europe as well. I particularly remember one soon after she retired, she got a very special Working Artist Project Award from the Museum of Contemporary Art here in Georgia. And that supported her work for a whole year on an exhibition that went up. And the Emeritus College took a field trip. So some of you might have been present for that. We went to, I didn't even know it existed, to tell you the truth, Museum of Contemporary Art, and saw her work for that exhibition and heard her talk about that exhibition. That was 6 years ago this month. I know it was March because the Women's Center,
March 2012.
because the Women's Center supported that in honor of Women's History Month. Many of her works have ended up in collections, museum collections, gallery collections, of course, private collections. There's some here at the Carlos, there's some at the High, there's some at the aforementioned Museum of Contemporary Art, there's some in Washington, there's some in DC, there's some in Europe. I mean, it's all over the place. She's been very busy since she retired in 2009. And most recently, well, I do wonder, we can ask what you're actually doing right now, but most recently, the effort issued in this exhibition she's going to talk about today, it went up at Appalachian State, the Turchin Gallery up there, in the fall, and just closed about a month ago.
Yes.
Yes.
It ran a little longer than they first had intended, but just wanted to do a few more days.
Well, and she was
So
able
I
to.
got back on Wednesday.
Yeah, got back just Wednesday. We've got some of it here for you to look at, the actual work. There's some wonderful photographs back there for you to look at it. I asked if we could take them home. She said no. But do take a look at these wonderful photographs. Really special exhibition. Actually, we might be able to schedule another Emeritus College field trip because the same exhibit, or pretty much the same, is going to go up at the Circle Gallery, University of Georgia, in October. And that might be a nice field trip for some of us to take. And both at Appalachian State and Circle Gallery in Georgia, another Emory artist is represented, right? Diane Kempler has an exhibit as well, an exhibition that was up at Appalachian State and will be combined with Catherine's work at the University of Georgia. So I wanted to mention that. So she's going to talk to us about curing the trees. She has such a special feeling for trees. But I think she's not alone in that. I have an idea that we're a room full of people who have special feeling for trees in general, and probably some trees in particular. I bet you all have trees you remember from childhood that you played under, played in, climbed in, trees in your yard right now that you care about. Some, I know I happened to talk to my friend Linda on Saturday, and she's still grieving for a big white pine that had to come down, so big, so beautiful, so sick. And she confessed on Saturday that the day it came down, she had to leave the house. She just couldn't see it happen, right? I understand that. I'm sure Katherine will too. I think we've all got that feeling. But I don't know how many of us could express it as well as Katherine can in the work and then what she has to say about it. So let me turn it over to Katherine to use the time as she pleases.
Thank you very much. Oh, I never put on this. I'm very sorry. This is going to give me one quick second here. I'm very sorry. I should have worked this out.
It does work great once you get it hooked up.
Am I hooked? Is this?
Yeah, I'm just trying.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that worked. Good. I want to thank all of you
That
for
may be
being.
just a tad loud.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me. No, that's off on.
I'll control the volume.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So say a little something.
Okay. How is this?
Not enough.
Not enough.
Oh, I sound like Goldilocks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. I am loud,
Sounds
I think.
great, yeah.
Okay. I want to thank all of you for being here. I really am most appreciative. And I also am very appreciative of the Bianchi Award, which I received, which was help and encouragement as I worked towards this exhibition. Okay. Forward. It's perhaps starting off with an 1878, which is not my work, lithograph of J.W. Lauterbach seems an odd choice. But I wanted to make it clear that when we think of trees, we are thinking of an endangered world. This amazing image is of people going into the woods to gather chestnuts. Of course, we know that chestnut trees succumbed to a blight many years ago. But look at this beautiful undulating land, which is typical of old-growth forest. Today, most land has been at some point tilled or bulldozed for agriculture or development. The trees depicted here predate the founding of this country. In many areas of the U.S., developers are saying that there is no problem with clear cutting and then replanting trees. The replacements are saplings. There is no replacement for an ancient tree. Generations will grow up without ever having seen such a magnificent sight, nor having the benefits provided by such a mature canopy. A few years ago, I became aware that a white oak on my property had become diseased. And of course, I called experts who diagnosed the problem and we began fertilizing the tree roots. I began a series of writings and drawings addressed to the tree. I began with some very small works, which I continued to work on off and on for several years. These small works were not studies for larger works, but simply to generate ideas. This one is titled Oak and Rain, and this sheet size, the paper size, is 10 1/4 by 7 1/4, and that will be the case for the next two. I try to always give you dimensions because I think otherwise you don't know what you're really trying to visualize. And the next one is Struggle. Here I've got the actual piece. It looks blue on my computer. The color isn't that off there, but it's still maybe a little bit strange. In Struggle, you see the problem the tree was having. A particular kind of wasp was laying its eggs in the leaves. In the beginning, these looked like beautiful amber beads in the green leaves, and but they were deadly. So below is, you see the live leaf, but totally encrusted with these little bitty beads. And then you see the, I do have a pointer. I'll try it. Okay, here we go. So then this one is a dead leaf. And this one was completely encrusted with their eggs and gripped like a tightly gripped little fist, rolling up on itself. And Hope is the last of these small works that I'll show you now. There were 9 of them in the exhibition. Here you can see the little amber eggs moving across the leaf, and I hope not invading it. My hope is for the recovery of the tree. This is 3 leaves, so this is a much larger piece now. It is 41 inches by 29 inches. The white oak leaves have become, for me, emblematic, and the drawings serve as talismans for me and the tree. By extension, this tree has come to represent to me all trees and the endangered world. When the leaves of this tree fell, they would break sometimes like a chevron and look like desiccated bat wings. They were very strange looking, and there were a lot of them coming off of that tree. So hence the dark chevrons represent the dying leaves, and the white ones represent ghost of the tree leaves. The tree now seems much better. It's getting along well, but in 2015, the tree defoliated completely at the end of May. Beautiful leaves, and then suddenly they were off. And then they put out brand new leaves, and by early July, those were off the tree. And I thought, the tree can't survive this. And it put out a 3rd set, and that lasted till mid-November, when it came off normally. So there is no way I cannot be moved by that tree. And next is movement. And I think you can see the movement created by the circles that are coming in from either edge of the drawing in to interact with the circle in the center. And I think that gives it a little different rhythmic feel from the other pieces. And this one is titled White Oak Night. It makes use of a device I've sometimes used in the past. I can't quite put this down. It makes use of a device I've used in the past, which is when something isn't working, just cutting it out of the drawing. So in this case, I cut out the middle section. The one on the right had originally been a horizontal part, and the one on the left had been the upper horizontal part. And so the midsection was gone. And then I think it did work for me. And I wanted a different sort of rhythm with this piece, and some element of fear and of night for the tree. Okay. And this one is lichen 2 views. Lichen is based on a tiny white lichen I found on the ground, and it was not much bigger than my thumbnail. It was beautiful, almost like a crochet doily. And one side, the top, was white on white or pale gray, and the reverse side was in light browns. Each side was beautiful in a different way. Some lichens are benign, but others can be an indication that the host tree is not in good condition. So you can see the, I've got it. The white on white side is right through there, and the brown on brown side, is right there. So that's the top and the bottom of that little lichen that was a sort of half circle, little doily looking thing. Okay. And this one is white oak. And here I'm going to talk about a bit my working process. This one has the emblem, kind of standard things for me at this point. The white oak leaf there in pale green pastel. And I want you to look also, there are bits of red that show through the drawing, and there's another one down here. So there are lots of different things that go on through the drawing. I don't just do the layer that you see, but anyway, I usually begin with drawing my grid, and then I usually begin with writing, and the writing comes from stream of consciousness and journals, and sometimes quotes from others. I sometimes put a wash down before writing to have a base color. I tend to write, and did in this case, in concentric rectangles. So I'm writing across the top, then I go to the side and I write down the side, then I'm actually writing right side up. I turned the page. But anyway, so I'm writing across the bottom and then back up so that they're in concentric circles that are converging towards the center. Sometimes the right, I've just said that, okay. The meaning of the writing is very important for me, even though the viewer will probably not be able to read it. I don't want people spending all their time looking for a particular word. What I want is for them to perceive the drawing, because I think it's too easy if you read a few words and you say, oh yes, I've got it, and move on. So I want people to really look at it as a drawing and not focus too much on the writing. Then comes an overlay of washes followed by other elements of drawing. For example, a leaf or acorn. Sometimes I wash over the squares which contain writing to further embed the writing between the layers. Sometimes I go over surfaces with Conte, graphite, or other dry media to enrich the surface, and that's where that green on the leaf and the red that's sort of hidden in there comes in. Those are dry media, pastels in that case. Then comes a series of concentric circles and radii, which will need to be painted in. Usually the last element to be applied is the sheen collé, which is glued on Asian paper. Sheen is short for Chinese or China, and collé is glued. So it's a glued Asian paper, which is very translucent. And in this case, the sheen collé is in the top two and side two, top two, and back up. But then there's other sheen collé coming down into the central section of the piece a little bit. So it's got different things going on in different areas. I've been using many layers in my work to deepen its meaning, at least for me. I'm interested in what happens when one layer, one pattern overlays another and a third thing results. And I'm going to show you another piece. This is titled Chaos, and this is a good example of that kind of thing. It's probably the most complex of all the works that I'll show you, and it's one that I worked on several weeks and was just ready to have a fit. Anyway, I almost tore it up, and I put it face to the wall for a couple of weeks more so that it wouldn't bother me while I was trying to do other things. And then when I turned it back, I thought, okay, now I know what to do. Now I can see it again because I haven't been looking at it so hard, and now I know what to do. So the final, I'm sorry I'm getting tangled up because this is, I don't have a, maybe I do have something for waste. That works for men. It doesn't work for me. Sorry. Okay, so the little triangular shapes that are going two different directions, some one direction, some another, are sheen collé as well. And when I put those on it, it did what I needed. So I was very happy with that and didn't have to tear up the drawing. Okay. Following a trip to Alaska in 2016, in which I saw my first glaciers, I began using this kind of what my interpretation of glacier blue. And it's based on the Aalik Glacier, which I saw on a, we were not on a cruise, anyway, on a day trip boat ride up the Kenai Fjord. We were, I could hear the rumbling like thunder of the glacier and then the shattering sound like glass falling into the glacier as parts of it broke off. Although it was snowing and sleeting when I was there the first few days of September, it was soon to enter a more wintry weather when there would at least be a chance for the glacier to rebuild itself. However, a series of photographs over a good number of years of the glacier revealed that it has in fact been retreating. Okay, this, okay, Okay, wait, let me just do one thing. Okay, this is Cold Moon. Sorry, and okay, and this one is How Many Moons. So I'll get this right in a minute. Okay, so in Cold Moon, I wanted to tell you, there are prints made of the leaves. I had a gesso, which is what traditionally artists have used as an underpainting white. And in the Renaissance, it was made from rabbit skin glue and marble dust, but today you buy it and it's like latex. But in any event, it's very thick, and so you can dip whatever in that paint and move it around. So the little kind of blobby looking little leaf forms were printed from actual leaves. And okay, now then, am I doing this right? Yes. How Many Moons uses what I believe to be a Native American expression measuring time. How long before we take the environment seriously? How long will these magnificent trees and glaciers be around? Okay. In the mountains of North Georgia in the fall of 2016, there was a series of forest fires, some of which were possibly deliberately set. These fires were unusual for Georgia, at least in their severity. In Raven Gap, I've often visited the Hambidge Center Creative Residency Program, which some of you may also be familiar with. So this beautiful historic place sits in 600 plus acres that are deeply wooded and crossed with streams and several wonderful waterfalls. It was a very dangerous situation for the Hambidge Center because of these fires, and they had to evacuate all the residents and find safe storage for all the documents and objets d'art that they had. Even in Atlanta, many of you may remember, it was smoky here as well on many days. And we were a good 2 hours away. Fortunately, right at Thanksgiving, a light rain, little more than a mist, began to fall. But it was enough to slow the fires down. And then within the week, the long drought ended and rains came. And so that is the subject of Rain After Fire. Okay, and it was followed by, well, Chaos you've just seen. I had it up on my wall for a while, and when I did Rain After Fire, I put it to the left of it, and when I did the next piece I'm about to show you, I put it to the right, and I thought, well, that's really interesting, and it sort of makes sense. And then when the curator came for a second visit, she said, ooh, I like the way you've hung those. We ought to do that in the show. And I said, yes, I agree. And I was actually planning to do that. So this one I have with me today is titled Ghost Trees. Okay, let's see. I get off my text and then I've got to regroup here. So you can see the kind of ghostly acorn in the middle of the painting, and there's some very light little, oops, sorry, wrong button. Okay, some light trees delineated, and those are my ghost trees. I had been leaving Yellowstone on the way to the Rockies, and when we passed a section of forest that, which had burned, and it was absolutely stunning in its awful beauty. The bark, these were conifers, and the bark had completely burned off of them. So the trees that were satin smooth, black, and then the charcoal, crumbled charcoal looking background of the ground they were on. So it was kind of an amazing image to me. Okay. I had been in the Boston area and made a very ordinary photograph of a stand of trees in front of a house. There was a light snow covering the woods, and at dusk it was quite beautiful. In the interest of trying something I'd never done before, I took this ordinary little photograph, cut it in half, and had FedEx Kinkos blow up each half as large as they could. So that was 3 feet, but, whoops, sorry. Got to hold on to that thing. thought it would stay there on the edge of the table, but it doesn't. Anyway, and so they blew it up to 3 feet by 3 feet. I then gridded off their print of it, and of course it was completely distorted. As you know, if you've blown something up too big, you almost can't determine what the image is. And that was fine with me. So I gridded off a corresponding piece of paper to work on. And I didn't just want to do a painted landscape the way you would normally paint a landscape. So I thought of each square as a separate little painting unto itself. And the snow, I painted pale gray, and the right through there or here, any place where it's clear enough, you can see a little bit of the branches I left. There were tiny twigs, a lot of them, and those I left the white of the page, and then the snow is painted pale gray. Let's see, and the trees, I went over writing up and down the length of the trees with ink, and then went over that with a wash of powdered charcoal and graphite. And there was a network of, okay, I've done that. Then came the circles in radii with 3 colors, scattered and of different sizes. But I wasn't quite happy, and this was one I'd almost spent 2 months on. It was an incredibly slow process for me. And it was really distressing because every layer I thought, oh, that just did perfectly. Oh, that went on so nicely. And then I looked at it and I thought, yeah, but it's stillborn. This just isn't working. But I did have an epiphany at 3 a.m. a few days later. And I decided that what it needed was a labyrinth, which is an idea I've worked with some in the past, but not quite like this. And I decided I wanted to just almost throw the paint at it to do it. And I thought, no, Katherine, when you do that kind of thing, you really mess up. So stay with it. And so you can see the labyrinth comes in, it goes down, it goes up, around, and out. So that's where Through Snowy Woods becomes the title instead of just Snowy Woods. Let's see. And when I painted that blue, I was just amazed because I thought, this is, I'm going over different surfaces, I'm going over the other paint, and the paint went on like silk. I've never been luckier with paint. It just sort of went on there, and so flawlessly. I was astounded. Okay, and then this little guy, Blue Leaf, it's a small piece again, but it gets me back to my glacier color and my emblematic oak leaf, and then you see trees kind of coming in from the side, some branches as well on either side. And in several books, I discovered something previously unknown to me, the mycelial web. The web is a communication, in quotes, system among and between trees. It enables them to nourish each other and even to protect each other from various diseases and insects. It consists of root structures, earth and leaf mulch, and a variety of fungi. Often we think of fungus as harmful, but some are actually helpful and benefit the trees. It's my understanding from a variety of sources that this web system is just now beginning to be understood. So there are several books that kind of treat with this, and some are more scientifically grounded, I think, than others, perhaps. Anyway, this is mycelial web, and it's my poetic, not scientific depiction of this web. And the books I read, I read a whole shelf of books as I worked towards this, because trees were really a kind of new thing for me to think about in much depth. And the books range from scientific to historic to poetic. I think of myself not as a scientist nor a preacher, although I'm preaching at you a little bit about trees, but a poet in my approach. Okay. And this is the lone tree. And this, I guess, would be my white oak. It is, and you can see it's 30 inches by 23 inches, and it is one of the drawings that I brought in. And here it seems that the tree is sort of reaching out with these circles, but it's very constricted in feeling. It's not making any kind of connection, I don't think, because the land had been bulldozed long before our house was built, or not long, but some before our house was built. And next is night mist, and I've always been moved by mist and fog and a sense of mystery, especially in the night. I see the lights and darks in the background representing trees in the distance. And these are some installation shots. Well, let's see. Okay, this is a general installation shot from the Turchin Center at Appalachian State in Boone, North Carolina. I've got the professional from their photographer photographs of the whole installation back on that table. So when we finish, if you want to take a look at that, I hope you will. So let's see. The space was very unusual. I've always worked with a sort of rectangular or square box, which most galleries have. And this was quite unusual and really required a lot of very, very careful planning because of this, the needs of the spaces, the needs of the size of the work, and trying to work all of that out in a more complex way. And it's actually kind of fun. You just have it's not higher math, you just crunch a lot of numbers. But you also, my process, I begin to develop a vision. What do I want to feel? What do I want to see when I go in there? And then I have to do the numbers to make sure I've got it working as it should. And the curator was very pleased with it. And although I had thought the site might be more difficult, I actually came to appreciate it because it made for a much more intimate viewing experience. People were really looking at things closely instead of from way across the room. So then, this is the installation, which is part of the larger installation. It's an installation within one. And also the title is the same, Hearing the Trees, which is the title of the exhibition overall. This piece consists of 24 metal roofing, not ceiling tiles, each of which is 14 inches by 9.5 inches. As installed on the wall, they occupy a space approximately 62 inches high by 67 inches wide. I found these metal plates while returning to Atlanta from Nashville. We exited the highway to cut through the little town of Bell Buckle, Tennessee, one of a series of railroad towns in that part of the state. There on the sidewalk in front of an antique store was a stack of 25 metal plates bound together with twine. And I asked the merchant what they were, and he replied that each plate is a piece of roofing tile dating from the 1800s. He had 3 stacks of them. I immediately thought something could come of them, but I was afraid to buy more than 1 stack since I really had absolutely no idea what I would do with them. and they weren't real cheap either, so 1 was a good number to go with. And they sat on my studio floor off to the side, still bound in twine for a year. But mentally I kept going through different things I would do with them, all of which were kind of bad ideas. Which was good that I waited because I didn't ruin them trying to do the wrong thing. So I finally opened them up. I thought the time has come, and I spread them across the floor, and I was stunned. I thought, these are beautiful. These are so much more beautiful than I had ever imagined that they would be. So they were kind of perfect for me. They had originally been painted forest green. So the green you see is the original paint. And you can see that they're rusted, they're blackened in places, the paint's crumbling off, and which I think is part of their beauty. I really love the way they look. And so instead of thinking, I'm going to do this to these plates, I began thinking, okay, I'm going to let them talk to me some, and we'll see where to go with all of this. Each plate had been stamped with a shape in bas-relief, which to me looks like a simple shrine. And I had observed that. I knew it was there and was working with it, but I had them spread down on the floor. And so I'd pick up the one I was working on and I would put it on my work table. So I never saw what they were like with the raking light. But once they were there in the Turchin Center, all of the little shrines show. I was really delighted that they were that easy to see. Let's see. So, and on the left-hand edge of each one was a little indented sort of strip, and they had two or three holes in them. So they were kind of like notebook pages with holes, and all we had to do was attach them with nails in the pre-existing holes, because I decided I didn't really want, one, I could risk, if I tried to put a hole in something, I could end up shattering part of what I thought was so nice. But also I just felt like, okay, they're a gift, I'm going to work with what they're giving me, and it turned out to work very beautifully that way. And one little tree, this little guy right here, there's an acorn, and then you come down from the acorn, and you see it's a little water oak, and it was about this big, and the acorn was still attached to the tree. And I saw it growing in the mortar area of a stone wall, so I was able to just pick the tree up, and when I picked the little tree up, the acorn came with it. So I thought, this is actually wonderful. The other is a pin oak over there, and then you can see there is an actual white oak leaf, the kind of reddish brown. There's one that's gessoed white. I said I used them to paint with some, and then another one is cut from a kind of heavier gauge paper, as is the acorn shape. And the way I attach them, because when I attach them, there would perhaps be one hole in the whole plate that I could use for this purpose. And as you know, if you attach them, how are you going to get the thing to stay? So I wound a thin wire around the little tree, or the bundle of, let's see, in this case, it's a little bundle of sticks. But in the end, let's see, here's another oak that's a red oak with some acorn caps on it. So what I did was wrap around the little tree, and then I would put both ends through the hole where it would have normally fallen out. But like many women, I have a whole bunch of buttons, because often when you buy clothing, you get an extra button. So I've got a little box of buttons. So all I had to do was put each end of the wire through a different buttonhole, push the button up against the back of the plate, and tighten it up. So they're very stable. But also, eventually these little things may rot away, and if I want to replace them, it'll be very easy to untwist the wire and do so. Okay, let's see where I've been talking and not looking at this, fortunately. Okay, one of the metal plates has a list on it titled Some Tree Heroes. A few of the names will be familiar to you, many and many may not be. One I really want you to be aware of, and I realize I'm not talking to students at Appalachian State, I'm talking to people, many of you in the sciences, and you probably know more about this than I do. But this is what I want to tell you anyway. So one I want you to be aware of is Alexander von Humboldt, the great German scientist who was born in 1769. He was the first to observe and document the effects of deforestation. He journeyed across the Americas between 1799 and 1804. Just getting there was an accomplishment in those days. In Venezuela, he visited Lake Valencia. People had lived there a very long time, but over the years, they cut down some of the trees to make way for agriculture and diverted some of the water going into the lake to irrigate their crops. with the result that the lake began to dry up, and they were losing the fish were dying off, and they had been a major source of protein for these people. Finally, the people had to move to a different location. Their environment could no longer sustain them. Von Humboldt, and we don't have that luxury today. So von Humboldt documented these facts even before 1805. Think about how long. In 1843, von Humboldt listed 3 ways in which humans were destroying that is our environment. These were, and still are, deforestation, ruthless irrigation, and, quote, great masses of steam and gas produced in industrial centers. This is what today we would call carbon pollution. So, indeed, how many moons, how many years, how many centuries before we start trying to really do something? I attended a lecture at the Carter's, this is wrong. Got it. Okay, sorry about that. I attended a lecture at the Carter Center in Atlanta by Jill Jonas, who wrote a book which I've also read titled Urban Forest, A Natural History of Trees and People in the American Cityscape. And I recommend, if you have any interest at all in this, it's an incredibly well-researched book and very, very interesting. And you realize how much we've lost in caring about trees over the years, over many years. She writes of people who she called tree heroes who have made a major contribution to the American land and cityscape. And one you may not be familiar with is Andy Lifkis. He got his start as an environmental activist at age 15 after attending a camp in the California mountains. He's about 10 or 11 years younger than I am, if you want to place him in time. After attending that camp, he learned that magnificent trees there were dying and that it would help to be planting new trees to replace the ones being lost. Upon returning home, he assembled a band of past campers who, with permission, went back to the camp and ripped out an old parking lot and planted around 500 trees. That's pretty amazing for a 15-year-old to oversee. And at 17, he formed a citizen forestry, quotes, group called Tree People. The California Division of Forestry was going to plow under 12,000 seedlings, and he could not persuade them to donate the trees to him to plant in less affluent areas which had few trees. They wanted $500. So he visited some local politicians and received, this is California, and receiving their support, approached the media, which absolutely jumped on the story. And this is long before the internet, this was before GoFundMe or anything like that. The Forestry Division told him that he had better be at his dorm first thing in the morning to receive the trees. And this was said to him like a threat. So he gathered all of his tree people. He, meantime, because of the newspaper articles, had received $10,000 in donations. The average donation was 50 cents. So it really was a children's campaign. And he rounded up his tree people, volunteers. He received milk cartons pro bono from a dairy to contain each small sapling. He received truckloads of fill dirt after having bought one truckload. And American Motors donated Jeeps, this is amazing, to move the trees to their new locations. The trees were planted, and Andy saw to it that they were maintained and watered. Lipkiss is now, as he always has been, a few years younger than I am, about 10 or 11 years younger. He still runs Tree People, and he has expanded into watershed management. He has been an invited speaker many places, including at the United Nations. He has received numerous awards for his work and written a number of books in collaboration with his wife, Kate. And I want to share with you the quotations which are in the installation. These are in order left to right, top to bottom. Okay. And I'm sorry my voice isn't better. I stood by the river today, considering the forms of the elms reflected in the water. Henry David Thoreau. And then in a different location, their singular beauty was such that I was forced to turn aside and contemplate them. It is time for us to kiss the earth again. It is time to let the leaves rain from the skies. Let the rich life run to the roots again. Some tree heroes. So some of these you may know very well. You will know very well. Alexander von Humboldt, John Muir, J. Sterling Morton, James Russell Lowell, William Saunders, Theodore Roosevelt, Eliza Ruhamah Skidmore, David Fairchild, Frank Mayer, John Rosenow, Andy Lipkiss, Deborah Gangloff, and Jill Jonas. Jill Jonas, again, is the author of this book, which I recommend for anyone with an interest in the subject. So back to the quotations. Imagination is a tree, Gaston Bachelard. It is remarkable how universal these grand murmurs are, these backgrounds of sound, the surf, the wind in the forest, waterfalls, etc., which are yet to the ear and in their origin are essentially one voice, the earth voice, the breathing of the creature. The earth is our ship, and this is the sound of the wind in her rigging as we sail. And then from W.S. Graham, imagine a forest, a real forest. You are walking in it, and it sighs round where you go in a deep ballad on the border of a time we have seemed to walk in before. And then for me, imagine being a tree trembling beside a stream, casting your shadow on winter's stone. A forest is, in all mythologies, a sacred place, Henry David Thoreau. Because I knew the metal plates would be, let's see, next slide. Okay, there. I knew the metal plates would be installed with nails as I directed, and I also knew that nails usually have shiny heads. So I mixed up some paint and took a little container of paint and a brush so that when I got there I could at least paint those little nails so they wouldn't be so distracting. Okay, and then there are just a few little details. This is one I like because of the almost circular form of that oak branch with the leaf curving. But that also shows you the condition of some of the plates and how wonderful with rust and that sort of thing they are. Okay, and the shadows were brown, and I've never seen brown shadows before. I have no idea why that occurred, but the color of the light itself was beautiful. It was clear, and you really could see the colors quite well with no distortion. So that is what I wanted to present. First one, I will tell you, Diane Kempler is here. When we applied for the exhibition at the Turchin Center, we had applied for a 2-artist exhibition because we thought, oh, that would work. You know, maybe we would have a chance doing that. We can't just go and say, hey, I want to show. So we'll do it that way. And the curator got back in touch and said, I would like to visit both of your studios, which she did. And she offered each of us a solo exhibition, which of course is the best any artist wants, is a solo exhibition. So, but then we wanted to be able to have the show travel. And I was aware that the College of Environment and Design at the University of Georgia now occupies what in around 1962 was their new art building designed by the Atlanta architect Joe Emisano, and it had a big gallery in it. So and in fact they do run it as a gallery, and what they want is documents and whatever art pertaining to the environment. So they offered us the 2-person show that we had applied for first. So we'll be together in that one. And I'm perfectly delighted to answer questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. I'm going to give the mic to John to.
I'm sorry.
Oh, is this more to
following
look
this
at?
lead.
Yes,
This is just a few of the details. And right there, you can see the little bit of wire wrapped around those branches. So that's what went through the single hole and then through the buttonhole. And that's some of the tree heroes. You're just seeing part of that.
I do have one question, actually, if you could go back to that image.
Sure.
With regard to this installation, to all of the roof tiles, as you say, part of the beauty is the rust and the paint flaking off, the green paint. Have you done anything, do you plan to do anything to kind of fix things as they are now, or will you let that process just kind of naturally continue?
I couldn't figure out a way to fix it very well. I tried a polymer thing that I thought might seal the surface, but it darkened the green. And I didn't want to distort the color. I think it would have even darkened the rust areas. But also, it would have only fixed the very top surface, and what's peeling up is a little thicker than that. So I'm sure if I took it to the Carlos Museum, they could do it for me. But but I'm just going to let it be a temporary piece. And certainly the branches, if need be, I can replace. I hope. Yes.
Have you gone back for another stack of the tiles?
I did. And I got, when I was there, because the man had told me he wanted to see what I'd done, if I actually did anything. And I did bring him some photographs to show him. And I bought another stack. I don't think any of them had the magic that these did. And I'll probably try to do something with some of them. But I mean, these were just a gift. Yes.
Katherine, hearing about your process is just fascinating, and seeing these beautiful works is wonderful.
Thank you.
I'm interested in your use of the grid. The effect, in a way, to me, it gives the idea of looking through a screen or looking through a window. And then there's the idea also that this is very geometric, and you're looking at the natural world through an imposed order. And I'm wondering how that worked for you, how you worked with that.
It's a very good question, and I don't know because I've used grids for years, and I don't feel like it's a crutch, but I just like working with grids. So, and I guess we all kind of have to follow, you know, I don't always know what I'm going to do next, but I do use them. I like to use them. And of course, I'm also, I like geometry very much. And I'm not at all, I mean, I'm just a terrible mathematician, but maybe that's why I like it. I don't have any preconceived ideas about it. So, but I do enjoy geometry. Yes.
I have a technical roofing question. I'm wondering on those shingles, whether the brown corrugated part is the part that is up on the upper side of the...
I think the part where the nails were, we've got one back there, you can see. I think they would have hung so that the shrine would have been lying on its side. And I think the corrugated part may have been where one overlaps the other to fit them in.
That makes more sense, yeah.
But that's a guess. You know, I've never seen, I had no idea that we'd ever used metal roofing tiles. I thought we'd always used, you know, in the country you just see sheet roof.
Katherine, I have a very pedestrian question, going back to the drawings. Just about the tools you use, colored pencils, ink, I mean, it's astounding to look at those and know their drawings and the meticulous care with which they're done. And I'm just thinking about, what are the tools that allow you to do that?
Very ordinary tools, but I like using them a little bit. Like I'll do things with pastels that I'm not interested in traditional looking pastel drawings or the traditional way of using pastel. but I like what they do if I can use them my way.
Is there any use of ink in the writing, or is that
Yeah,
pencil?
and no, it's not pencil, it is ink. And in recent years, I discovered there's the same paint company whose paint I use most of the time now makes an ink, a black drawing ink, that is the same base as the paint. So my assumption is that the two will like each other and work together archivally. But that's what that is. And then I had not an eyedropper, but a little syringe-like thing for administering a medication to a cat I used to have. And I had saved them once the cat got well. And so all these blue streaks, I would just sort of drop the paint down with that. So I use, whatever seems like it's going to work for me at the moment.
How do you get the perfect circle?
I drew those around a euro, a coin. And then I just painted the wash around the circle.
And a ruler, do you work with a ruler?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah.
I like that you quoted from Humboldt as the first tree lover.
Uh-huh.
There's a current one. I don't know if you're familiar with this man. His name is, a wonderful name, Peter
Wohlleben.
Wohlleben.
Yes.
He has been on the bestseller list in Germany for way over a year with his first book, which in German is Das geheime Leben der Bäume, and in English, The Secret Life of Trees. He's a forester by profession. And
I've read the book.
Yeah, but maybe somebody else hasn't.
Right. Oh, yes. I wasn't trying to stop you. I just wanted you to know I'm on the page with you.
In Central Europe, there are no more original forests at all. They are all now forests that are managed, and when they're managed, it's not the same. The only one he ever quotes that's really still really good is Yellowstone Park. You've got to really preserve that.
He also mentioned, I think, the Adirondacks. Some in there.
But he loves trees. I love trees. I love the book. I think any of you who like trees, he writes so well.
If you get Smithsonian,
get the book.
I think it's their current issue of Smithsonian, which has a big article on him. And he's been controversial a bit because, and this bothered, I will confess, this bothered me a bit. I thought he's really trying to anthropomorphize trees a bit. On one hand, it's wonderful that he truly loves them and cares about them and knows what he's doing that way. But I think, I thought of this morning when I was having breakfast. There was a little grave marker in that beautiful cemetery in Decatur, and it was to, and I've forgotten the young woman's name, Sally, I'm going to say Sally, to Sally, our little black friend with a white soul.
Yes,
and it's very sweet and very touching. It's also really wrong-headed. Because he could not, whoever put the little stone there in that lovely gesture, could not conceive of a black person being that good. So she must have a white soul, right? So I feel like, well, that's a little bit of this. He's sort of, oh, trees are so wonderful, they must be like us. So, but that was my only, but I enjoyed the book very much.
And so then read the follow-up book, which is The Secret Web of Nature, where he correlates hunters and deer and wild pigs and forests.
Yes.
I see some spirituality in some of this. The shrines, for example, there, and also the cross. Is that?
Wait, now where is the cross?
It's, in the white oak.
Okay, I knew. I saw that and I thought, somebody is going to ask about that cross.
Catherine, repeat his his comment or question.
Okay, he's about to ask me if I'll shut up about the cross in that piece. If I can go reverse, I can get back to it. Whoops, we're turned off. Okay. It does appear, it's just where one vertical and one horizontal crossed, and it does happen to be centrally located. And I thought if I try to diminish that, it's going to mess up the drawing. But it wasn't intended as, I think Thoreau and I are in agreement about nature being really our experience of spiritual life. Yes.
With regard to the roofing tiles.
Yes.
In terms of looking at it and considering what tiles are being used for in terms of also conducting rain down, and the terracotta tiles which we have all around us, the nails are on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And also, because of the curve of the thing and the shrine, the thing would be down, and the ridges would be what keeps the things flat so that you have a reference surface
Okay.
for what is a curved surface.
Okay, good. That sounds probably much better than my explanation. Because I truly can't pretend that I know how they were installed. Okay, yes.
I live around here, so.
Andy, wait till you get the mic. Thanks.
Some of you may live around here. I see a lot of trees, and when they change color, etc., it's beautiful. And I have a feeling, I've been to many cities in the world, that we are very lucky in Atlanta to have a lot.
We are indeed. And we're losing them at an astounding number every day. So we really need to keep planting trees and try to encourage people to keep the trees they have. Yes?
Catherine, you mentioned North Carolina a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And when you had the picture about the ghosts.
Uh-huh.
And I was wondering, North Carolina is being besieged with the woolly adelphi and the hemlocks, of course, dying, and they're huge. I mean, these marvelous, majestic.
Some of that is from acid rain, I think.
Well, it's a mite.
It's
a
okay.
mite that eats the needles
Mm.
and has no enemies, and so once these trees lose their needles, they die. And so a lot of North Carolina, especially perhaps western North Carolina, which I'm most familiar with, looks like a ghost forest. And it's the saddest thing.
It is.
As you drive up, higher, and there's just these ghost-like scenes, and so there's a big challenge.
There is.
Even the saplings and the new ones coming up are also
succumbing to that.
Affected by them. So
it is a tragedy, and I don't know. We have so many scientists that I'm sure work on these things, but it's very difficult, apparently.
A lot of things have been tried, and then they affect the rest of the ecosystem, or the birds, or, and so in some ways it's easier to let the trees go and hope that the next group will be not so affected. But it's a sad sight of ghosts.
Yes,
I'd like to alert everybody to that. So I don't think they've hit Atlanta. Have they? You've got one?
I don't know. Mine are not infested with those, but they're struggling anyway.
Well, that's because they're so low, and hemlocks really thrive better in more rainforest type. But anyway, it's a ghost town.
Yeah. So these problems continue that are documented so well in that history of trees in the urban landscape.
Some of you will remember, as I do, what it used to be like traveling in England many decades ago, and then along came that Dutch elm disease, and then returning to England to see all the dead trees before they took them down, and then they were just gone. I have a question about, I suppose, sort of what's going to be next for you, what you're probably already in the middle of. The exhibit, the exhibition that Emerita went to see at the Museum of Contemporary Art, the major theme there was houses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wonderful. And of course, so many of us feel so much about houses that we love.
Mm-hmm.
And trees. I'm just wondering if you've got another subject or two that are also close to your heart and central to work or work you'd like to do someday.
I don't think I'm quite yet done with trees, but so we'll see.
Yeah. Would you add to the exhibit, the exhibition more as you work?
Well, it would become different exhibitions, but
Yeah.
you know, I feel like I want to explore it a little bit more.
There you go.
I never know what I'm going to do next. I mean, you know.